older kids, they're not yet allowing all of them to return.
All
Yeah, we'll
righty.
see how it goes. Right, Amit?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much, panelists, for coming over. We are just live, and we'll wait for a minute or two, and then we'll start. Uh, so, so we have the panelists from California. We have Karthik from California, and we have Roni and Keren from Israel. And we're going to be doing a lot of chit chat today. I think Israel has gone into a lockdown again, and Keren is not very happy about it. So we will try to have some fun. We'll try to ask you some fun questions so that we add some spice to our life while we are in lockdown. All right. So let me start with Keren. Keren, thank you so much. Keren is a BSc in Life Sciences. She is an MSc in Immunology and Oncology. She is a PhD in Pharmacology and Polymer Therapeutics. Wow. So I learned a lot of oncology word today. And she's the founder of Keren Miller IP. She's a patent attorney by profession, and she has lots and lots of experience, and she practices in Israel. Thank you so much, Keren, for coming this evening. We wish to learn a lot from you. Thank you very much. Moving on to Karthik. Karthik is again entrepreneur. He's a CEO of a company called FlickQ. Am I pronouncing it right, Karthik? FlickQ or?
It's just Flick.
Just Flick. Just Flick. It's a company called Flick, and they develop smart sensors and algorithms and IoT-based platforms for industrial and consumer application. Karthik has been running Flick from almost about 6 years now in California. Moving on to Roni. Roni, thank you so much for coming and joining this this panel today. Roni is a CEO, professor turned CEO. Roni has a lot of experiences. He is a serial entrepreneur. He has built several companies in the past, and we will definitely learn a lot from Roni today because he has the experience of building several companies from scratch over his lifetime. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you very much. Roni, I'll ask my first question to you. How have been the last 6 months for your business?
I think it's been probably as problematic as for most of the countries. While the biggest question is how to deal and balance between the tactical and the strategic decisions. One thing which I think is very important is to stick to the strategic plan of your company and to understand that we are going through some kind of a bump in the road, so to speak. I have to say that for me, that's the third bump in the road. I've already experienced in one of my companies in 2008 when the world was stand still almost, and there was a global crisis, and we had to overcome it, and we had to see what can be done. I think probably there are a lot of difficulties related to the situation, but as a CEO, first of all, you have to stick to your strategic plans, and then it's a good opportunity to see whether any of your basic assumptions has changed dramatically. What I identify from my perspective is that things, due to the COVID-19, things were accelerated. So tendencies that were on the way anyhow, for example, in terms of digitization, the COVID really boosted up things and accelerated them dramatically. So things that would take something like 2-3 years happened within 6 months. So Zoom is the best example. Zoom was a very nice tool to use, but suddenly it became to be an essential component of our life. Remote learning, remote healthcare, remote medicine, thinking about everything in terms of doing it from a remote place, putting everything in the cloud and so on and so forth. So it's a good opportunity, I think, for every CEO to reassess the situation. See where you are. First of all, validate that your market is still valid, that your product is still valid, that your assumptions are still updated? And if not, this is a good opportunity to reassess and turn your ship like a couple of degrees to the right or to the left in terms of the heading and adjust yourself to the new reality.
Wonderful. So Ronnie is saying that you got to stick to your plans, but you also have to validate your assumptions and you have to reassess your plan. You perhaps have to pivot things which were taking a lot of time before are now happening at the quick of the button. And Ronnie, so tell us about your business. What business are you doing currently? I was trying to figure out, but I could not figure out much about your current business. There's not a website perhaps, or even on your LinkedIn profile, I could not figure much out about current business. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay, no problem at all. That's because I'm doing so many things, so it's difficult to identify one specific domain, but I'm very much focused on things that are related to testing and certification of autonomous vehicles, autonomous airplanes, robotics, those kind of things. I'm very much engaged with how do you conduct what I call smart testing, which means that how do you test AI-based systems, which begins to be a very dramatic thing to think about, because I'll say it in a nutshell. Basically, when you come to think about testing, you know what the system should do. And when you come to do the verification and validation, you compare the performance based to some kind of specification. So you know what to expect from the system, and you check whether the system does what it's expected to do. When you come to deal with artificial intelligence-based systems, then suddenly the system based on machine learning algorithms can change what it is think it should be doing. Therefore, not necessarily your expectations are right. So how do you test your system to see whether the algorithm is work correctly? And when you come to deal with things that are related to deep learning, and especially down the road, when you think about AI systems that will design AI systems, then everything becomes much more complicated. So my background is very thoroughly and very deeply related to testing, simulation testing, building scenario libraries, and so on and so forth. And the question is, how do you develop a methodology that will comply with that?
Excellent, wonderful. So clearly Ronnie is a deep tech guy. He's testing autonomous vehicles like aeroplanes, robotics, and other autonomous vehicles using artificial intelligence and deep learning. Thank you so much. There's a lot more questions coming over your way, Ronnie. Thank you. I'm glad you had a sip of water. Over to you, Karthik. Tell us about your business a little bit more, and how have been the last 6 months or 7 months for you?
Yeah, the Flick is basically in the business of monitoring remote equipment. So let's say you're a company that has remote assets, so a pipeline for an oil and gas company, or an engine inside a vessel that's out in the middle of the ocean, right? So it's always a little bit challenging for companies to monitor these remote equipment that are not always connected to the cloud. So we provide a technology that allows companies to monitor these remote assets very easily. So that's sort of the business we're in. We're in the industrial IoT business. And the product really is a software. It's an AI software that runs autonomously, independently, to actually monitor these remote equipment.
Wonderful.
So over the last 6 months, I'll echo what Ronnie just said. I think it's given us a chance to reassess the company, to see what works well, what doesn't work well, right? And the pace of digital transformation, as Ronnie said, is something we have noticed as well. So there are certain industries which have been lagging behind in terms of adopting digital technologies. So it's given us a chance to focus on those industries over the last few months. And from our own internal strategic standpoint, it's given us a chance to work on our product. Right? Earlier, it was more catered towards solving a need that a customer has. But over the last 6 months, it's given us a chance basically to focus a little bit more on internal R&D, make the product a little bit better. And then when the market picks up, we'll be better positioned, I think, to scale up. So we've looked at it strategically. We've looked at our own R&D, and we've reassessed the mix of the customers as well.
Wonderful. Karthik, are you guys funded?
No, we're a bootstrap company. So we started about 5 years ago, and we haven't raised any outside money.
Is that by design or by default?
Yeah, the technology that we were working on initially took a little bit of time for us to get it to a mature state. So it was by design. I spent the first year and a half just sort of working by myself to create the initial prototypes. So after that, we started getting some customer traction, and we just haven't had the need to go out and raise money. So it just kept growing organically.
Mm-hmm. So what's your vision for the company for the next 5 years?
But it's hard to say. I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen in the next 5 months. So, next 5 years, hopefully, I mean, this type of technology is here to stay. As Roni was saying, we're sort of on the confluence of technology and AI as well. So it's as AI becomes more sophisticated and starts to find its way into these types of small sensors and edge devices, then I think with 5G, you're going to see more of these devices out in the field. So hopefully, we'll sort of ride that wave and grow as a company over the next 5 years.
Wonderful, excellent. Thank you so much, Karthik, for throwing light on that. Keren, over to you. You are in Israel, you're working with companies in life sciences, you're helping startups and companies in this area. Do you also work with investors as far as IP is concerned?
With investors, sure. Yes, also.
What do you
mainly for conducting due diligence analysis, yes. Yes.
What exactly do you do in a due diligence for an investor?
Yes. So investors understand the essence and the importance of IP. And when they check due diligence, during due diligence, an IP portfolio of a company, there are a few aspects that we check. First of all, the strength of the IP portfolio itself, and what we do is that we conduct in-depth analysis. We try to understand the invention, we read the applications, see how the claims are drafted, making sure that the claims provide enough support to cover the actual product, and that the claims do not allow an easy design around. This is a very important aspect to check. And also, another very even most importantly is to make sure that the invention can be patented. If the invention, the application already being granted, this is one thing, but also we need to make sure if the invention, the application is still pending, then we have to understand that it can be patented. So we conduct a patentability analysis, and how we do that, we check the file history of the applications in the various jurisdictions in which the application was filed. If the application is just a PCT application, and the international authority that checked the application and conducted an analysis already issued the ISR, the International Search Report, and written opinion, then we check this document and we read the references that were cited against the application, and we try to evaluate and assess what chances are that the application will be allowed eventually, and if indeed, which kind of claims will be allowed. We have to make sure that the claims are broad enough to allow good protection for the product and that are not too narrow. So patentability evaluation, this is one aspect that we check. Obviously, we also go through the entire family of the application, making sure that each application that was filed in the various jurisdictions is indeed pending. It was not abandoned for some reason, maintenance fees were paid. All formalities have to be checked very adequately. So this is another aspect. And also it is very important to investors to see that the application itself belongs to the company, that you assigned rights, the inventors assigned the rights to the company, and the applicant is the company itself. If it's only an inventor, then the applicant can be the inventor and there will be less issues about this. But if this is a company already, a company, a registered company, then we have to make sure that the applicant of the application is the company and the inventors assign the rights to the companies in the USA.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So that was perhaps very detailed. Some of the things which Keren said perhaps have bounced over your head, but I will explain it to you in maybe simpler words, being a patent attorney also. What Keren is saying, before an investor is putting his money into a company, he wants to make sure that his money is going in the right place. He wants to make sure that if he's putting money in a startup, the startup has the relevant IP with them. The startup is able to defend their IP. The startup is able to cover their products with the relevant IP. The startup is not infringing anybody's IP. And all those aspects are being checked by Keren in Israel in the life sciences domain. Thank you so much, Keren, for throwing light on that. IP is definitely very important for a lot of investors. Roni, what is your take on that?
I don't think I have much to add to what Keren said. I think when you come to register a patent, and I have gained some experience on that, it's very much to understand what exactly in your IP, what exactly in your invention is patentable. One of the things that many inventors mistake to think is that they have a great idea and everything is patentable, and they can take this great idea and turn it into a huge patent, and then at the end, once they go to people like you and Keren, and when they go to IP experts, they say, no, this is a fantastic idea, but 85% of that is not patentable. Only 50% of that is patentable. So it's very important for you, for people like you, to convey to the inventors what exactly in their invention is patentable. And the other thing is that you have huge contribution, if I may say, and I'm eager to hear what Keren and you have to say about that, but that's from my experience. Usually, IP experts have a huge contribution in assisting the inventors and assisting the company how to reshape their patent to make it much, much, much stronger. Because you have the wide perception, you know what's there in the market, especially if I think of Keren understanding what she's doing, and she is expertising in a specific domain, so she has a very wide perspective about what is there in the market. So sometimes you come with an idea and somebody like you can come and say, listen, if you take it 2 degrees to the right, and if you add one component, then you strengthen your patent or your invention dramatically. And it's for you to help them because they are so engaged with what they are doing, and usually inventors and entrepreneurs are so much in love with their idea that, like in any falling in love, they are blind and they don't see what's just besides them. So I think this is a very important stage at the beginning to focus on what is really going to be your major IP.
Absolutely, you said correct, Roni. So I was in Motorola in Chicago, and I was in-house patent counsel. A lot of patent applications filed by Motorola at that time, about 2006, on Moto Razr and Moto Ming. I was in the Moto Razr team, and Motorola was struggling with the battery life during those days, and we filed a lot of patent applications for Motorola's battery phone and feature phones. So what I learned in Motorola was each and every word that you say in the patent application is important. Generally, inventor is, let's say, suppose you invented this pencil. I will not call it a pencil. I'll call it perhaps a writing device. A writing device can cover a pen, can cover a sketch pen. So because you invented a pencil, but I will call it a writing device or a device for making a mark. So that will make it even broader. So the kind of language that we use in a patent is actually most important. The language is more important than the invention itself. A lot of times, a good patent attorney can help you draft and come up with the right language, and can make the value of invention into a multi-million-dollar invention, even if it's a small invention. So you're absolutely correct. And we have been working with a lot of software companies in the US in the last about 6 years, 7 years, and helping them protect their IP primarily in the software space. You are absolutely correct. So a lot of inventors that come to us, they give us one narrow focus, and we asked them, what else will you do in the next 4 years on this product? And so the product roadmap, which they tell us, we also include the roadmap of the product in the patent application, and maybe file a few patent applications so that we have a patent portfolio covering the entire product suite, drafting it in a manner which will increase the valuation of the company. So you are bang on it. Thank you very much for expressing your views on that. Roni, are you guys funded at the moment?
Are we funded? No.
No.
No. I think I have done my share of venture capitalists a long time and angels, and I've done my share.
Okay. All right. So what's the plan now? So you're bootstrapping at the moment. Company's profitable?
No, we are trying to generate our own revenues and to stay even as much as needed. If at some point we think that we need to get funded, it's going to be very much focused, and it's going to be funded for a specific step in our development. But I think if I may add to what you said previously, and I agree with what you say, there are two things. If you come from the entrepreneur point of view, there are two things to look for. The first one is entrepreneurs are eager to get money. And they're like a very thirsty guy walking in the desert, and you are going that way, and somebody tells you, hey, there is some water on the left, you will divert yourself and you go to the left, which is a wrong thing to do. And sometimes investors, especially venture capitalists, will come to entrepreneurs and say, well, if you do that, then we shall invest in you. And it's a very big dilemma, because you need to think at that point, when you're very much thirsty, to think whether you stick to your plan and stick to your invention and stick to your idea, or you follow the money. And I would recommend to stick to your idea if it's a good idea. And in order to do that, I would recommend, and I'm doing some marketing for you, Keren and Amit, I would recommend every entrepreneur to approach an IP expert as soon as possible, and to validate their thoughts, to validate they are standing on a good foundation, and to get their advice in terms of how to steer the ship. For example, one of the things that entrepreneurs like to do is to tell everybody about their idea, and to go all over the world and share everybody with their idea because they're so much in love. And then they come to you and Keren, and you say, well, hopefully you haven't shared this idea with anybody, and say, yeah, I've just been to 3 or 4 conferences and I read presentations, and then it's all gone. So it's very important to go to an IP expert at a very early stage. Make sure that you are standing on a good foundation of an idea, and stick to your plan. And if somebody comes to you and say, I can give you money if you do something else, they are not good for you. Let them invest in somebody else. Have patience. Look for the right investor for you.
Excellent.
That's my take from my experience.
Wonderful, wonderful. Definitely, that's a very good, and that is coming from experience and extremely good piece of advice. Perhaps at certain stages, investors are also playing games with you. They are just testing you whether you're running after money, or do you believe in your idea or not. And if you say, yes, I will do it, perhaps you don't have an investor anymore, because he was just playing with you. He was just testing your guts.
Right.
Absolutely correct. Thank you so much for that, Roni. So testing autonomous vehicles using AI, I'm sure you have a lot of IP. Am I right in my assumption?
Well, it's a little bit tricky, because my IP is related to methodology. And methodology is something that is very difficult to register as a patent. But I'm not working only with autonomous vehicles. I'm working with robotics and some other autonomous systems as well. And lucky for me, this is a really virgin land. People don't really know how to approach it. And so I'm lucky in that sense that when I come to talk with companies and I say, how do you test your systems? Especially when you come, I'll give you an example, when you come to autonomous vehicle, at some point you like to run your car in an urban environment. somebody from the city hall is going to come and tell you, do you have a certification to run this car autonomously? And then the question comes, who certifies it? Against what standard do you certify? So this is an exciting era because people are writing the standards together with the manufacturers, and at the same time, they're trying to figure out how to test it and against what. And it's not only the methodology, because once you have the methodology, you need to invest, you need actually to develop the testing tools to do it. So it's not easy to write it as a patent, but there is a lot of IP in it.
Sure, excellent. We will talk in detail about it. In the US and in Israel, in India, in Europe, you are absolutely correct. So there are two things which can be patented: a method or a product, a process or a product. Now, all the process that you are following to, let's say, test robotics or test an autonomous vehicle can be patented by drafting the patent application in a manner that is acceptable by a patent office. So we will touch upon that later, perhaps one-to-one next week, if that works for you. But yes, you are right. There is a lot of IP, and you are definitely lucky if there's a lot less people doing it. You definitely are lucky, and that's the right time to protect it and perhaps use your patents to license to somebody else and earn some royalty from that. Absolutely correct. Thank you so much. Karthik, so are you looking for investors at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, as Ronnie said, if the terms are right, if the investors are right, and it helps us sort of scale the business, then certainly, yeah, we'd be open to that. It's really a question of finding the right partner. I think that's the key thing.
Yes,
you have to be aligned at this stage. We're a company that's growing. We're fairly diversified. We have an interesting product, so yes, we do from time to time talk to VCs about it. But it's a question of finding the right VC, I suppose.
What are the top 3 questions VCs ask you?
It's always about the market, right? I think that's the key thing. Are we going after a market that's sufficiently large? That's always a key question. Is the product unique? Is there what is the competitive landscape? I think that's always interesting for them. And finally, the team, right? Do we have the right team to take this forward? So those are typically the 3 general questions or concerns that all VCs have, I think, when they decide to make an investment. So the market, the team, the product.
Excellent, wonderful. Market, team, product. Did an investor ask you about your exit strategy ever? So did they ask you, hey Karthik, what's your exit strategy?
No, the good VCs are typically not interested in necessarily laying out the sort of roadmap to an exit. Right? It's something that sort of happens organically if the team is ready, if the company is ready to be acquired. So the VCs that we have talked to don't specifically ask about the exit, but they do want to know what the long-term plans are. Mm-hmm. So I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from my standpoint at least, it's always important to convey that you are in it for the long run, right? And you're building a company that can sustain these types of bumps that we've seen over the last few months, and you're really building a sustainable business. And everything else, the exit and everything else sort of takes care of itself if and when that happens. But generally speaking, I think the focus from a company standpoint has always been to build a sustainable business over a long period.
Mm-hmm. Do you think an entrepreneur, once they take investment from an investor, becomes an employee of the investor?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you accept outside money, you are going to be in that situation. I don't think there's a way around it, right? If you take money from a VC, you have the VC sitting on your board. So you obviously are answerable to somebody else. So yes, the situation that Ronnie mentioned earlier is valid. You do have the influence of investors once you accept somebody's money. So you really have to decide whether that's the right type of investment or investor you need for the company. And that's why, as I was saying earlier, you need to find alignment with the investor. It's sort of like a marriage, I suppose. You need to find the right partner, but it's more important to make sure that you're aligned. And you're in it for the long run, right? So it's typically startup journeys are 5 to 10 years. And so you have to find the right partner for that period of time.
Excellent, wonderful. So what Karthik is saying, that it's not dating, it's like marriage. You've got to stick with the investors for some time. You make sure your investing partners are right. You should have your visions aligned. You cannot just accept anybody's money just because somebody is offering you money. You just should not be taking it. Otherwise, you perhaps will have altercations, and visions will not match, and you perhaps will not be able to reach your destination because you have two drivers on the driving seat and you don't know where you're going to crash. That's the learning from Karthik. Thank you so much. Keren, I'm sure you also worked with a lot of small companies and startups. What advice do you give them on IP? To small startups which are coming to you with less money, but great idea. What do you do for them?
Yes, I think the first advice would be two. Actually, I have two points to mention. One is that before you decide to draft your patent application, you have to be very knowledgeable about the field of your invention. I generally advise clients to conduct prior art search. They can do it by their own. They can hire a special company that can do that for them, a patent attorney, whichever. But it's highly important to understand the field of the invention, to know, to be very knowledgeable, to understand how you are different from what exists in the market, and try to focus, when you draft your first patent application, you have to focus on this difference and explain how you're different, and not only how, and what's this different, what improvement does it provide. These are very important aspects that you have to know, and it's very important to rely on those aspects when you draft a patent application. This is one thing. The other thing is, Roni started to mention it, is that you have to be very, very, very careful before you disclose your inventions to others. You should first file a patent application. It can be a provisional patent application. It's much more cheap. So it's mostly you will be able to afford it because patent applications that are not provisional will cost more. So if you have a limited budget, it's preferable to file the provisional. But you should be very careful when you speak with others about your invention. So keeping that in mind, if you feel that you're still your product is still not mature and you want to continue developing it before you file the application, you can do that, but remember to keep silence. And also, if the budget is very limited, I would advise that you file the application just before you start searching for investments, because when you file the application, first application, you have 1 year to file in other jurisdictions. If it's a provisional, you have 1 year before you have to file a PCT application or national applications. And 1 year is very limited time for developing a product. So it would be preferable, if the budget is limited, to file just before you speak with the potential investors.
Excellent, wonderful. Absolutely.
There is another aspect for that, is that if you approach the investors, once you have registered the patent, doesn't matter at what stage, your value is higher. So you're in a better place to get invested.
Absolutely.
And also, many clients ask me also if they can just approach and rely on the IND, and I say no, you should also file a provisional application before you approach investors.
Absolutely.
To protect your invention, yes.
True that. Yes, absolutely correct. Apart from what you are saying, what we also do for our companies, small companies in the US, there are a couple of small companies in the New York area. What doing for them is this: uh, they want to invest in IP, and just filing a patent is expensive, okay? And you should know why you're filing a patent. What we do for them is this: before we file the first patent for them, we do an IP strategy for them. How an IP strategy works: we identify how many competitors do they have and how many patents these competitors have filed and in which technology area. We also identify if the startup wants to, let's say, gets acquired in about 5 years, and if we know that Salesforce or Oracle can perhaps acquire the startup, how many patents are Salesforce or Oracle is filing in this technology area. So we do a lot of other things to guide this startup to file their first patent, second patent, third patent, fourth patent, which aligns with their business idea. And then we start getting into the inventions and drafting patent applications and filing them in India, US, China, Japan, depending upon what's the IP, what's the bigger aim, what's the bigger goal. We do a lot of patent landscapes for them. Patent landscape for one of our clients, we did a patent landscape in the virtual reality space. In the virtual reality space, the client wanted to file a patent application, but before filing a patent application in the virtual reality space, we did a patent landscape for them. That who are the companies filing patent application in virtual reality? In which year are they filing patent applications? From how many years are they filing patent applications in virtual reality? In which country are they filing patent applications in virtual reality? So do so much analysis, and then you know that if I want to file a patent application on virtual reality, I must be filing in China, I must be filing in US, because these are two main countries which are accepting a lot of patent applications in the virtual reality space. And perhaps Sony and Microsoft are the two companies which are also filing a lot of patent applications in the virtual reality space. And hence, these two companies can acquire my startup or my patents which are in the virtual reality space. So patent drafting and filing just one aspect, but before you draft and file a patent application, there's a lot done around it to ensure that you file the right patent application in the right country, in the right domain, at the right time, with the right velocity. You might want to file, you might have to file 5 patent applications in a year, or you might just only have a budget for one. The velocity of filing patent applications is also very important that we help our clients in. That was my 2 cents. Karthik, over to you. In our lives, Karthik, and this COVID, it has been a blessing in disguise for a lot of reasons. We have gotten a lot of time for ourselves, for our families. I have been interviewing a lot of people over the last 2 months or so, and we've gotten a lot of time with our kids, with our families, and we don't go out too much, we don't shop too much, we don't drink too much, we don't spend 5 hours drinking with a friend. So we got a lot of time for ourselves. So since you got a lot of, I'm assuming you perhaps also got a lot of time for yourself. Uh, did you take up some projects which you have been procrastinating in the past, but now since you had time in the last 7 months, you took up those things? Yes, I have time now. I will not procrastinate on these things and I will take up these things professionally or personally. If yes, if you took up certain projects which were delayed before, what were those projects?
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, Amit, I think from a purely professional standpoint, it gave us a chance to work a little bit more on our own R&D. So I think that was really one of the key benefits of the last few months of a generally tough time for everyone. I think from our point of view, we were so focused on creating a product for the customer that we sort of were very tactical in the way that we were approaching the business. So if there was a need for a certain type of feature for a customer, we would design it. But I think now we have a more focused R&D roadmap. So I think some of that introspection and focus on our own R&D is really the key outcome from a professional sense. Personally, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, we get a lot of time. We have spent a lot of time at home. So we generally like to travel as a family, so we haven't been able to do that. So yeah, just spending time at home, working on different things. My son is into music, so we've been listening to a lot of music, which we just haven't had the time to do that over the last 5 years. So that's been good, and some other pastimes that we just haven't had the time to really spend some time on. So yeah, overall it's been quite good. It's nice to start eating healthy again. We're not going out as much. So personally as well, I think it's been a good change over the last few months.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, wonderful. Thank you so much for throwing light on that. I'll ask Roni now. Roni, so how big is your team?
It very much depends on the project. There are projects that I am alone, and there are projects in which we are 10 and 15 and 20. So I'm running a couple of projects at the same time, and it varies. It's very much depend on the nature of the project.
Excellent, wonderful. What are the core values that drive you and your company?
I think the core value has to be related to what are the fundamental expertise domains that you bring with you, and how can you maximize the experience that you have gained along the years. This is something that is definitely different today than what I had to experience about, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago. So one of the things that I identify is that when I'm engaged with projects right now, my perception is a little different. I have much more patience. I'm much more far-looking, and I think that I bring with me to the teams that I'm engaged with. I'm the sort of the older guy, not in the sense that I feel old. I feel very young, but in the sense of people say, you've been there, you've covered some mileage, so how can you share your experience with us? And I think one of the things that I can bring with me, and it very much depends, each one is different, is the multidisciplinary perception. The modern world is very multidisciplinary. And one of the things that you need to do is to see how things are engaged and how different domains get together and get the larger view. And this is really important, because basically if you compare the new reality to what we used to have a couple of, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and definitely when you look 10 years from now, you will see that a lot of things are related together. So we talk about Industry 4.0, we talk about 5G, and I'll give an example. I was engaged with cybersecurity for a long time, and cybersecurity was very much focused on a couple of things that are related to hacking, that are related to securing databases and so on. But when you come to think about it, cybersecurity became to be an essential component of nearly every product that you can think about. There is no low tech anymore. Everything is high tech. I'm engaged with food and agri-tech. Everything is high tech. It's no more the farmer that goes out with an irrigation system. It's all related to drones and GPS and mapping. And so when you have to understand a lot of other disciplines, and suddenly the discussion becomes to be a much more multidisciplinary. So you talk with a company, for example, that are dealing with agriculture, and they have people that come from navigation, and they have people that come from healthcare, and they have people that come from drones, and they have people that come from networking, and they must have everybody around the table. And when we come to talk about your expertise and your domain, especially when you come to talk about IP, it's no longer a very narrow IP in something which is very specific. It still exists, but there are a lot of new domains and areas of IP in which you touch a lot of other things. And Keren talked about you have to be an expert in what you're doing, and you have to research, and you have to understand your domain. It's not easy to be an expert anymore, because you have to work as a team. And you have to listen to a lot of people that come from different disciplines to have the comprehensive perception. And I like very much the holistic approach. If you don't come from a holistic approach, you have no chance, especially if we think about 5, 10 years down the road, you have really no chance if you don't come from the holistic comprehensive approach. There's no way.
Excellent, wonderful. That's a great piece of advice, Ronnie. I'm sure we're going to keep this in mind. Ronnie, one follow-up question. It is actually very cool to be a startup. I mean, people uh, are calling themselves startups because it's very cool to be a startup. In India, they changed the definition of startup few months back. In India, if you are a 10-year-old company and if your revenue is about $15 million a year, if your revenue is less than $15 million a year, you are a startup. My question to you is, when when does one should not call them a startup? When do you cease to be a startup?
I think startup is a mindset. It has nothing to do with how many years you're on the road. It has nothing to do with how many people work in your company. You can be a very small company and be very old, so to speak, in your mindset. It's that entrepreneurial mindset in which you wake up in the morning and you say, how can I do things completely different and change the world? If you still possess that mindset, for me, you're a startup. And I can tell you, I used to work with companies that were 15,000 people. And there were a lot of teams within the company, and those teams worked like startups because they had this DNA component of entrepreneurial thinking and disruptive thinking that they were like startups. So it's not that much about how many people are you, how long have you been existed, how much money do you have in the bank. It's a question of what do you do with it, how eager are you waking up in the middle of the night, sweating and say, I have to do this because I have a great idea and I must exercise. That's startup for me.
Excellent, wonderful. Same question to Karthik. When does one cease to be a startup?
Yeah, I agree. It's a mindset. I mean, before I started Flick, I was with a fairly large company and started a group within that company. So I treated that as a startup. Right? It's obviously a lot. So the risk is a lot lower when you're doing this inside the or within the umbrella of another large company. But essentially, the mindset is what determines what you call yourselves. And before that, I was with another large semiconductor company, and we did the same thing. So we started a small group within that company, and then we spun it out as a startup. So it's really, yeah, I agree. It's a mindset. So it's a question of what you believe in and how you go about realizing a vision.
Definitely, I think I totally agree with both of you. Startups have a positive and negative connotation. Startups can be looked at something which is agile, quick, entrepreneurial, no bureaucracy. At the same time, startups are also looked as somebody who is not so mature. Somebody perhaps whether they're going to stay for long or not. For big customers, might not come to startups because they might feel that this startup might just shut down tomorrow. So there are pros and cons of being a startup, and that's something which we have to understand. So Karthik, if somebody wants to start up a startup right now, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who want to build their building? There are a lot of people in this world who have cushy jobs and who are thinking about starting their first business since forever, and they're not able to do it. You did it. You had a cushy job. You were working in big companies before, and you started your own company. Uh, what do you need to trust your grit?
It's hard to generalize, but for me, it was really an idea that I had at that time, which I thought had some potential in the future. So we were working on some projects at my old company, which led me to thinking along sort of a certain direction, and I thought that the industry would evolve in that direction. Yes, the job was pretty comfortable, but perhaps in my case it was just a little too comfortable. There wasn't a lot of risk in just continuing with the job. So I'm sort of the type of personality that needs a little bit of risk in their lives. So it was always in the back of my mind to start something on my own. I'd been a part of a couple of startups in the past, so I liked the energy that small teams have and the passion really to grow that into a large company. So that is something that I've always wanted to do. So I had that sort of an idea that I thought, that's something that I could be passionate about and work on for many years to come. So that really was sort of the confluence of things that happened that led me to start Flick. So I think for others, it might be a slightly different reason, or the motivations might be a bit different. But I think my advice really is, if you have something that you're really passionate about, that you feel that you can actually spend 4 or 5 years building a business, then I think you should just do it. Especially these days when you have so many resources available for startups. Right? 10, 15 years ago, it was quite expensive to build a software company. And now you can basically do it for next to nothing. If you have a good idea, you can sort of just hustle and build it yourself. So there really isn't any excuse anymore for not doing that. So if there's an idea worth pursuing, I think you should just go ahead and do it.
Wonderful. That's a great piece of advice. Karthik, thank you so much. A lot of people who are still thinking that you are alone on the road. Thank you for bursting all these myths. If you really believe yourself, if you trust yourself, go ahead and do it, because there's so much available for you for free, and the opportunities are endless. Thank you very much for confirming that. Keren, when should somebody not file a patent? When should a company not file a patent?
Not at all.
When should somebody... am I audible?
You mean not at all?
Not at all, yeah, not at all.
When it's not enforceable.
Okay.
If you come to the conclusion that disclosing your invention, because when you file the patent application, it will be published eventually, and you believe that you wouldn't be, even if you can obtain the patent, even if it can be allowed, but it would be a problem to enforce it, means that you will not be able to detect infringers. This is something that you have to think about. And in some cases, you can build a strategy. You can find ways in which you will be able, yes, you will be able to enforce your patent. But some cases are very complicated to do that. And you have to invest lots of thinking before you file such a patent applications. It involves mainly method applications, inventions that are related to methods, or sometimes even software applications, but you need to think. I had a few clients that were debating whether or not to file the application for their invention. In some cases, they have decided indeed to do it, but in other cases, the advice was, no, you shouldn't. So.
Sure, great. If you can't enforce your patent, don't file it. That's the advice from Keren. Keren, we got a question from one of the attendees. He's asking if there's an idea being worked upon on the web, but the idea on the web is not working properly. So if you make an app for it, the app can perhaps solve the issues which are not being solved on the web application. Can you patent it, or can you protect it?
If you have, again, can you repeat, please?
So suppose there's an idea, there's a platform, it's a web-based application, and because
web-based application.
It's a web-based application, and there are certain limitations on the web-based. For example, the thing which you can do on your phone, sometimes you can do them better on your phone on an app than on the web. So if you are doing it on the, if the idea is existing on the web,
okay,
not working properly as per you, and you want to develop an app for it, because you think if you develop an app, you will be able to do better things than what are being done on the web. So in that case, can you protect your IP?
So if the only difference between the web application, between the web and the application, it's just that this one is in the cellular phone and the other one is the web. So that could be obvious. It may be novel, but it could be obvious. And one of the conditions to obtain a patent that can be granted is that you have to be non-obvious. So if it's obvious to do this as an application, then that would be very complicated and if at all allowed. But in many cases, when you adopt a known methodology to another device, as may be the case here, and the adaptation itself includes changes in the invention, then you can maybe pursue protection for those small changes. So you should consider it. You need to consider and approach the patent attorney and think, maybe there is something in the adaptation itself. Maybe sometimes inventors think that small changes are non-patentable, but in some cases that says they are. So it's worthwhile to check and evaluate these small changes. Maybe these changes will be more profound. So
absolutely. So this is for everyone to know. Suppose you have this cup without this handle, and if you insert this handle on the cup, and your contribution is this handle. So by adding this handle to the cup, you're making this cup new. And if you're able to prove that adding this handle is non-obvious, in other words, you have a non-obvious advantage, your invention becomes non-obvious. So all you have to do is, if any idea comes to your mind, just think about two things. Is it new? Is it non-obvious? If it's new and non-obvious, you can qualify for a patent. All you have to do is, how do you prove it's non-obvious? If you have a non-obvious advantage, for example, in cases this handle has a non-obvious advantage. If I'm able to hold the cup better with better grip, I will not feel the hotness or the coldness of the cup. I will not drop the cup because I'm able to hold it better. If I'm able to prove a non-obvious advantage of any feature, any small incremental feature, that feature becomes patent worthy. Thank you so much, Keren, for explaining it so nicely. The last round, guys. If any of you have a question to a fellow panelist, you can shoot now.
Yeah, I've got one. So I've been thinking a lot about IP over the last few months and years, and I'm always sort of trying to figure out which of our features or firmware or software, etc., is patentable. But there are certain cases where we want to keep that as a trade secret. So it'd be nice for you and Keren to maybe let the audience know how you sort of advise startups on whether something should remain a trade secret versus sort of revealed in a patent application.
Keren, you want to go first, or should I go first?
yeah, sure, no problem. It's a debate. It's a huge debate. It is indeed, I confirm. I think the answer lies on whether you can maintain this as a secret. I think this is the answer to the question. If you think you truly believe that you can keep it as a secret, then maybe in some cases it's better to have a trade secret. But you have to understand that if this secret eventually will be disclosed in one way or another, many cases by the employees, then you are taking a big risk. So in most cases, I generally recommend to file the patent application. But I do believe that it's a debate, and you need to consider seriously both options. What do you think, Amit? Do you agree with me?
Absolutely, totally agree with you. So Karthik, Coke, the formula for Coke is still a trade secret. Nobody knows how the Coke is made. Nobody knows. Nobody. It's a trade secret from the last 30 years. They have been able to keep the formula a trade secret. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows all the ingredients and the formulations and the compositions of the Coke. Similarly, you know GE and Rolls-Royce, they make aeroplane engines. The way an aeroplane is being serviced, the engine of the aeroplane is being serviced, that's the trade secret of GE, it's a trade secret of Rolls-Royce. Nobody knows when the aeroplane goes into a hangar for servicing, nobody knows how an aeroplane is being serviced, because they have been able to keep the trade secret of servicing an aeroplane as a trade secret. GE, they have their own methods, Rolls-Royce, they have their own methods. And that's not easy, by the way, to keep Keeping a secret from your wife is not easy. Keeping a secret from a bunch of people in your company is definitely not easy. Therefore, we advise that you file patent applications and protect the patent. The patent is going to give you some rights, and that's a better way of doing it. In India, for example, in India, we do not have a trade secret law. There's no law called trade secret. US has a trade secret law. A lot of countries do not have trade secret law because it's practically sometimes becomes impossible to protect a secret. It's basically a secret, and some secrets get leaked. It's better to file a patent. That's what we generally advise, especially with tech companies. We advise them to file. Did you answer the question, or did it confuse you further?
No. I hear you. I understand where you're coming from.
Wonderful, wonderful. Excellent.
Yes, in many cases, if you can reverse engineer also, you need to ask yourself, you can reverse engineer the invention, the product, whatever it is. And if it can be reverse engineered, this is a problem. Then trade secret should not be your way.
Right. Absolutely. So suppose you are installing a product, an IoT device on a remote machine to understand how the machine is behaving, to get all the parameters. And if anybody can reverse engineer that, you can't stop them because he did not steal your secrets, so to say. He is just reverse engineer it. So how will you stop him? Fantastic, Keren, fantastic point.
I want to pose a question for everybody. Just I'm not expecting an answer, but to give you something to think about. We are very close to a position whereby AI will invent their own inventions. And the question is, when a machine is going to invent something, who owns the patent?
We have actually, it's a very good question, Roni. On our website, photonlegal.com, we have a blog who, if the machine, AI inventor, the topic of the blog is AI inventor. I would send you a link of the article. These debates are going on from over now 5 years, and we have clubbed all these debates and wrote a blog about it. We'll send you a link for this question.
Send me this link also.
Yes, all of you. Yes. Wonderful. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you very much for coming over this evening, this morning, and sharing your experiences. You guys have not shied away from sharing what you know and giving up your secrets and your ideas and your learnings, your knowledge for free. The world can use your knowledge, especially in these times. People can use your knowledge. A lot of businesses have been suffering, are suffering, have died. Big companies have gone bankrupt. Small companies are struggling to stay put. Thank you so much. All these people will be able to use your knowledge. We're going to be disseminating this video onto multiple channels. We're going to be breaking it out into small pieces, 5-minute videos, and sending those videos out on different channels so the people can learn from the fantastic panel that we have tonight.
And let people have our own contacts should anybody would like to ask any further question.
Yes. So I have shared the email addresses of all of you with one another, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Amit. That was fun.
Take care of yourself. Have a fantastic weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.